Hello guys, what's up? My name is Emmanuel and welcome to this video on how to create an elastic IP address and associate that elastic IP address with an EC2 instance. If you don't know what an elastic IP address is, that's fine. We'll be talking about it. So I made this quick Google search with the keyword what is an elastic IP address, and under I have a definition of what an elastic IP address is. Let's check it out. An elastic IP address is a reserved public IP address that you can assign to any EC2 instance in a particular region until you choose to release it. The elastic IP address remains in place through events that normally cause the address to change, such as stopping or restarting the instance. So what they're trying to say here is that when you create an EC2 instance, AWS gives you an IP address, but there are some events that may cause that IP address to change. Like for example, if you stop the instance and restart it, you'll have a new IP address. So let's do less of the talking and let's do much of the practical. If you choose to follow along with me today, here are some of the things you'll be doing. You log into your AWS Management Console, you create an Amazon Linux instance, you SSH into that instance and you turn it into a web server by installing Apache on it. Then you create and publish a test.html file. Then you will use that page to test the public IP address of your instance. Then you will allocate an elastic IP address to it and you test it again to see if it's working. So I know all of this may sound complicated in case you don't know what you're doing, but trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what an elastic IP is and what it's for. Without taking much of your time, let's get started. So the first thing on our list is to log into our AWS Management Console. So right here, I'm on aws.amazon.com. I'm going to click on sign in into the console. And it takes me directly into my AWS Management Console. The reason it takes me directly into my AWS Management Console is because I was doing something before. That's why it took me back into the console. Since we are logging into our AWS Management Console, this part right here is good. So the second part is for us to create an instance. Let me put it that way. So to create an instance, click on EC2. Click on launch instances, but before I click on launch instances, let me terminate this instance. Great. Click on launch instances. Choose the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. You can choose any AMI you want. I just prefer to use the Amazon 2 AMI because it's free tier. So just choose that in case you want to follow along with me. Click on select. T2 micro is fine. Then we'll be launching just one instance and I'll be deploying this in my VPC. If you don't have a VPC, that's fine. Just use the default AWS VPC. Add storage, add tag. So I'll be giving a name tag. So I'll call this, the value will be name. The key would be name and the value would be elastic server. I'll hit on configure security group. I'll give my security group a name. I'll call it demo security group. Then I'll give it a description. So I'll say allow SSH and what am I typing? So I'll say allow SSH and HTTP traffic. So you can choose to give any description or any name to your security group. That's a personal decision. The next thing I'll do is I'll add a rule, and that'll be the HTTP rule, and the source will be custom, and that'll be fine. So I'll hit on review and launch. Then I'll review everything. I'll click on launch. Then it's going to ask me to select the key pair, and I'm going to choose an existing key pair, this one right here. Let me just make sure I have that key pair on my desktop. Let me see. So for some reason I can't find that key pair on my desktop, so I don't want to take risks. So I'm just going to create a new key pair, and I'm going to call this demo elastic key. and I'll download it, copy it to my desktop, and I'll hit launch instance. So I have this error here that says launch failed. That's fine. Just go back on review, click on edit security group, and just add Emmanuel security group. So in case you have that error, just edit the name of the security group and you'll be fine. Yeah, I have that key pair, and I'll hit on launch. So now our EC2 instance is launching. We will come back. I will come back when the EC2 instance has fully launched. Hello guys, I'm back. As you can see, our EC2 instance is running. The instance state stays running. So I want you to click on that EC2 instance, and I want you to copy this public IP address and save it somewhere. So just come right here. All right, public IP address, then and I'll save it right there. Sorry for that. And I'll save it right here. So let me try to make it normal text first, then let me make it bigger. So as you can see, this is the IP address Amazon gave us when we created our EC2 instance. Now that we have created our EC2 instance and copied our public IP address, it's time for us to SSH into that EC2 instance. Please, if you have not copied your public IP address, please do so. Just copy it and save it somewhere. Mine is right here. So let me SSH. So to SSH, what I usually do is, since I'm on Mac, I just open my terminal right here. And all what I do is go back to connect, SSH, copy this, and paste that in my terminal right there, and hit enter. Then it's going to say permission denied. Going to say Alex. Let me see. Okay, so I need to tell my machine where my key pair is. So as you can see, my key pair is on my desktop, so it's desktop right here. So my key pair is on this directory, so I have to change and go to that directory. So I have to say change directory, hit enter, paste it again. And it's going to give me this warning. In case if you see this warning, please do not panic. Just come back here and select this command right here. If you don't understand what is happening, there's a video online on how to do this. Please go watch it. I'm sure I will also make a video on how to SSH. Then I'll explain in details what I'm doing. Just hit enter. As you can see, now we have SSH into our EC2 instance. If you're not seeing this, it means there's a problem somewhere. Now that we have SSH into our EC2 instance, let's go see what's left. So let me go back. Yeah, we have SSH. So the next thing we have to do is to configure that server into a web server. So technically we have to install Apache on our web server. So go back to your terminal, and on your terminal, I want you to start by changing to the root user. So just type in sudo hit enter. As you can see, now we are the root user. Then the next thing I want you to do is to update your EC2 instance. So type in the command yum update /y. Now if you're updating your EC2 instance and you see a message like this that says no packages marked for updates, that's fine. Just go straight and install Apache. So we have to install Apache. So to install Apache, type the command yum install bish. ttpd, hit enter, and it's going to give us this message right here. Let me make my screen bigger. Then it's going to give us this message right here. It will give us some details on what we're about to do. It says the total download size is this, the install size is that. Is that okay? I'll say yes. And what will happen is that that command is going to install, is going to download and install Apache on our web server. So as you can see, Apache has been installed on our web server. And how do I know? It says complete down here. So even though Apache has been installed, we still have to enable our web server. So to enable that, I want you to type to start. Even though Apache has been installed, we still have to go start our web server. Please. We're going to enable the web server, but we have to start it first. So type systemctl start httpd, then hit enter, then enable it, system enable httpd, hit enter. Okay, so it says that the command not found. So the reason it's saying that is because this command up here is not correct and I have to correct it. So it's systemctl enable httpd. So as you can see, we just enabled Apache on our Ec2 instance. Let me clear my screen. To clear my screen is a personal decision. You can choose to clear your screen or you can choose to leave it like that. That depends on you. So we just enabled Apache on our Ec2 instance. So there are two things we can do. We can type a command to check if the server is running perfectly, or we can check that using our browser. I prefer to use the command. So type the command systemctl status, systemctl status httpd, hit enter. As you can see, it says active right here and it's green. So if you're seeing this active green sign, it means your web server is up and running. So that's one way you can check. The second way you can check is to go back to your AWS Management Console, click on instances, click on that instance we just created, copy this IP address and paste it in your browser. And if you see this test page, it means that your Ec2 instance is up and running, and it's not just running, it's also a web server. Okay, now that our Ec2 instance is up and running and it's now a web server, let's go see what's left. So we have done this part right here. So the next thing we have to do is to go create a page. Let's go create a page on our web server. So let's create a website. So go back here, and to create a page, if I go back here, you will see here it says here that you may not add content to the directory /var/ww/html. So if you want to add web pages to your server, you'll have to add it on this directory or under this directory. So let's go do that now. So I'll go back to my terminal where I'm logged into my Ec2 instance. Then I'm going to change directory and go to that directory. Cd, change directory. So var, you can just copy it and paste it there, that's fine. And I hit enter. So as you can see, he's going to change directory. If I say ls, as you can see, there's nothing in that directory. So what we want to do is to create a page in that directory. So I'm going to say nano, and I'm going to create a home page. You can create a test page, that's fine, but I prefer to create a home page. Then I'm going to hit .html, then press enter. Then I'm going to add something. I'm going to add some content to our page. I'm going to add some content, some HTML content. Then I'm going to say hello, welcome to my website. Then I'll close that. HTML. Then I'll close that. Then I'll hit Ctrl O to save, or hit enter, then I'll exit. So this page here has been created on our server. So what we need to do now is let's go back. So if I go back to my EC2 instance and I copy this public IP address and I paste it here and I put slash the page we just created, that's homepage.html, and I hit enter, it's going to show me my website. So this is my website now. It says hello, welcome to my website, and I'm able to access this website thanks to this public IP address. Now what if we stop our EC2 instance? What if something happens and our EC2 instance stops? So let's go stop our EC2 instance. Let me go back to instances. As you can see, the instance state here says stopping. So I'm going to pause this video and come back when the EC2 instance has fully stopped. Hello guys, so I'm back. So as you can see, our EC2 instance has stopped, right? So if I click on that EC2 instance and I refresh everything, the first thing you will notice is that we don't more have a public IP address. Why? Because this instance is stopped. So when we stop that instance, it's like Amazon took back its public IP address, the IP address they gave us. So this is the IP address we had when we created our EC2 instance. But because we stopped that instance, we don't more have it. We don't more have that IP address. So if I go and I refresh this page, nothing is going to happen. Why? Because that EC2 instance has been stopped. Now, I want you to pay attention to something. I want you to pay attention to the IP address you initially had when you created your EC2 instance. Now, let's go restart our EC2 instance. If I come back on instances, you see that our EC2 instance is starting. If you look at this, you see the state of our EC2 instances pending. If I click on that EC2 instance that's restarting, you're going to see that a new public IP address has been assigned to our EC2 instance. I want you to copy that. And I'll save mine here as new public IP address. So now this is our new public IP address. So if you check, you notice that our new public IP address, this one right here, it's different from the one we previously had when we created our EC2 instance. So when we stopped our EC2 instance and restarted it, Amazon gave us a new IP address. So if I use this new IP address to access the web page we created, that's homepage.html, it's going to load that website. As you can see, it loaded that website that says welcome to my website. But if I use the old IP address, that won't work. Now here's the problem. If I give this old IP address to my customers, I'll have to email all my customers my new IP address. What if I have 10,000 customers? What if I have 20,000 customers? Does it mean I'll have to go email them my new IP address each time my instance stops and restarts? No, that's not a sustainable strategy. So what we need is an IP address that does not change. It's an IP address that stays constant irrespective of whether we start or stop our EC2 instance. And that IP address is what they call an elastic IP address. So let's go create an elastic IP address and assign it to our EC2 instance. Now that we are back in our management console, let's see something. Let me click on instances. As you can see, our instance is now running, but this time it's running with a new IP address. So what we need to do is to create an elastic IP address and attach to this instance. So on the left side of your screen, if you scroll down, you will see elastic IPs right here. And you'll be taken to a page that looks like this. I want you to click on Allocate Elastic IP Address. And it's going to ask us the network border group. US is 1 is fine. Then I want you to leave everything as default and I want you to click Allocate. Then it's going to give us an IP address right here. As you can see, we have an IP address. Now the problem with this IP address is that it's elastic. So let's go associate this IP address with our EC2 instance. So to associate it, make sure you hit on check. So if it's on check, click check. Then click on actions and click on associate elastic IP address. And it's going to take us to this page. So we have two options when it comes to associating an elastic IP address. The first option is to associate it to an EC2 instance. And the second option is to associate it to a network interface. So for this video, we'll be associating our elastic IP address to our network interface. So choose your instance and choose a private IP address. Now, in case you're asking yourself where this private IP address came from, let me show you. If I open a new tab and I go to instances, I click on that instance, you're going to see private IP address right here. As you can see, this IP address is 10.0.0.46. If I come back here, you'll see 10.0.0.46. So that's where that IP address is coming from. So if I hit on associate, you'll see now this our IP address has been associated with our EC2 instance. So let me copy this somewhere. Elastic IP address. Let me make it big so you can see. So as you can see, we had a public IP address which Amazon gave us when we initially created our EC2 instance. But for some reason, we stopped that EC2 instance and restarted it. Amazon gave us another IP address. But that was not a sustainable strategy and we saw why. So we're going to use this IP address to make our public IP constant. So if I refresh this, you're going to see that our EC2 instance now has a new IP address, and it is that elastic IP address we associated to it or assigned to it. If you check here, you will see elastic IP addresses. You will see we have one elastic IP address, and it's this one right here. Now, let's test and see. So if I copy this elastic IP address, come back up here, paste it, put /homepage, that's the page we created, .html, and I hit enter. You'll see that using this elastic IP address, we are able to access our website. Hello, welcome to my website. Now let's go and stop our EC2 instance and see if our elastic IP address will change. So let's stop our EC2 instance. Let me go back to instances. Let me hit on refresh. As you can see, our new instance state is stopping. So I'll come back when our instance has fully stopped. Okay guys, as you can see, I'm back. And the first thing I notice is that my instance has stopped, which is a good thing. Now, let me click on the instance ID. Sorry for that. Notice something. Even though our EC2 instance has stopped or is still stopping, I don't know for what, why is, okay. Even though our EC2 instance has stopped, look at the IP. The IP is still the same. The IP has not gone anywhere. We still have that IP address. And why? Because it's elastic. It won't change. Even though our EC2 instance has stopped, that IP won't go anywhere. Remember the first time when we stopped our EC2 instance and refreshed everything, we didn't have an IP address. We didn't have an IP address the first time. But now we do have an IP. Why? Because that IP is elastic. Now let's go and restart our EC2 instance. And let me hit on instances. As you can see, our instance state is pending, so our EC2 instance is restarting. I'll come back once the instance is up and running. So as you can see, our EC2 instance is running. So let me click on it. As you can see, the instance state says running. But I want you to notice something. We just stopped and restarted this EC2 instance, but the IP didn't change. When we had this IP initially, when we created our EC2 instance, when we stopped it and restarted it, AWS gave us this new IP. We noticed that if we wanted our customers to get access to the resources that were stored on our EC2 instance, we had to go give them this new IP address. But we saw that was not a sustainable strategy. Then what we did was that we associated an elastic IP, which is an IP that does not change irrespective of whether you stop, restart, or reboot an EC2 instance. We associated that elastic IP to our EC2 instance, then we stopped and restarted it. That IP address didn't go anywhere. So guys, those are some of the use cases of an elastic IP address. So it's an IP address that does not change. It's a public IP address that does not change irrespective of whether you start or restart, irrespective of whether you stop or restart an EC2 instance. So let's go see some use cases of elastic IP addresses. So let's see some use cases of elastic IP addresses. Let me see. If I expand these, you're going to see this is a very good use case of an elastic IP. It says elastic IP addresses are most commonly used to help with fault-tolerant instances or software. For example, if you have an EC2 instance that has an elastic IP address and that instance is stopped or terminated, you can remap the address and reassociate it with another instance in your account. So that's a use case of an EC2 instance. So let me go back. If I terminate this EC2 instance completely, I can create another EC2 instance. Then I go back on elastic IPs. Then I remap that IP to the new EC2 instance I created. So guys, that was how to create an EC2. That was how to create an elastic IP address and associate it to an EC2 instance. We did not just see the creation, we saw a use case and we saw how useful elastic IP addresses were. So I don't want to get charged, and I'm sure you don't want to get charged as well. So let's go back and let's give Amazon its IP address. So is this IP right here? Click on it. Go on actions, click on disassociate elastic IP address. Yes. Then disassociating an elastic IP address is not enough. You have to release it. So click on that. Go here and release that IP address back to AWS. Great. So the next thing I want to do is to delete this EC2 instance or terminate that EC2 instance. So click on instance state and terminate. So guys, that was how to create an elastic IP address and assign it to an EC2 instance. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you have a question, please leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.